The natural world is full of mysteries, horrors, and mind-blowing surprises, from deadly predators with unbelievable powers to bizarre creatures that seem straight out of a science fiction movie. The line between reality and the impossible is thinner than you think. Buckle up, because this is going to be one wild ride through nature's most shocking secrets, the CIA's spy cat. It sounds like something straight out of a spy movie, but this was real. In the 1960s, during the height of the Cold War, the CIA launched one of its strangest and most secretive missions ever. Its goal? To create a living, breathing animal spy, a cat that could sneak into Soviet embassies and record top-secret conversations without anyone noticing. They called it Project Acoustic Kitty. At the time, US intelligence agencies were desperate to find new ways to eavesdrop on the Soviets. Hidden microphones were bulky, and human spies were easily spotted. But cats? Cats could go anywhere. They were quiet, independent, and people ignored them. That made them perfect, in theory. So the CIA's research and development team got to work. They brought in surgeons, animal behaviorists, and audio engineers to perform an experiment that sounded more like science fiction than reality. They implanted a tiny microphone inside the cat's ear canal, a transmitter and battery inside its chest, and a thin antenna wire along its spine and tail, all carefully hidden under its fur. The technology was incredibly advanced for the time. This was the 1960s, long before modern microchips. Yet somehow, they managed to make it work. Then came the next challenge: training the cat. Agents tried to teach it to move towards specific voices or sit quietly near people who were talking. But as anyone who's owned a cat knows, cats don't take orders. They do whatever they want. After months of testing and several surgeries, the CIA decided the cat was finally ready for a real mission. They released her near a park in Washington, D.C., where two Soviet officials were having a conversation. But what happened next was almost darkly comical. The cat took a few steps toward the target, then wandered into the street and was immediately hit by a taxi. Just like that, years of work and millions of dollars were lost in seconds. Some reports say agents recovered the cat's body and confirmed that the equipment had actually worked. The transmitter was functional. But the project was declared a failure. Later, a declassified CIA document bluntly described it as a remarkable scientific achievement that was simply not practical. Project Acoustic Kitty was officially shut down soon after, but the files weren't made public until decades later, stunning people who could hardly believe it was real. It stands as one of the strangest intelligence experiments in history, proof that even the world's top spy agency once believed a cat could save the Cold War. Bacteria in the fog. In the early 1950s, San Francisco was known for its mysterious fog, thick, rolling clouds that blanketed the city almost every morning. But one particular fog held a secret that no one could have imagined. In September 1950, without warning, the US Navy conducted a secret biological experiment right over the city, an operation later codenamed Sea Spray. The goal was chillingly simple: to test how easily biological weapons could spread through the air in a real urban environment. To simulate an enemy attack, Navy ships just off the coast released huge clouds of bacteria into the fog, a reddish, harmless-looking microbe called Serratia marcescens, mixed with another called Bacillus globigi. At least scientists believed they were harmless. Over the course of several days, the bacteria drifted through San Francisco, carried by the wind into homes, offices, and hospitals. Residents went about their lives, completely unaware that they were breathing in a government test. The Navy's report later claimed the experiment was a success. The bacteria had spread across the entire city, proving that a biological attack could easily infect a population. But soon after, strange things began happening. Doctors at a nearby hospital noticed a sudden outbreak of rare infections. One man, Edward Nevin, became critically ill after contracting a strange bacterial infection that doctors had never seen before, caused by Serratia marcescens, the same microbe the Navy had sprayed. He died shortly after. Other residents were hospitalized too, though at the time, no one connected it to the military's secret experiment. The truth didn't come out until more than 20 years later, when government documents were declassified. Only then did the public learn that their own city had been used as a testing ground for biological warfare, and that similar tests had been carried out in dozens of US cities during the Cold War. The government insisted that no harm was intended, but the experiment showed how easily invisible weapons could move through the air, infecting thousands without anyone realizing it. Today, Operation Sea Spray remains one of the most disturbing examples of human experimentation ever conducted on American soil. A fog that carried not just mist, but a deadly secret. The sky-rained fish. In the small town of Yoro, Honduras, something unbelievable happens every year. The skies darken, thunder roars, and when the storm finally breaks, fish start falling from the sky. Locals call it lluvia de peces, which literally means rain of fish. It's not a legend, it's not a metaphor. According to hundreds of witnesses, this bizarre phenomenon has been happening for more than a century. It always begins the same way. An intense, almost supernatural storm rolls across Yoro. The winds howl, lightning flashes, and rain pours for hours. And when it's over, the streets are covered, with live fish flapping in the mud. Families rush outside with baskets, collecting the fish for dinner. To them, it's a blessing, a miracle from God. The locals even hold a festival every year to celebrate it, complete with music, parades, and prayers. But scientists have been puzzled for decades. How can fish appear on dry land, miles away from any river or ocean? One theory says that waterspouts, powerful tornado-like columns that form over water, could suck up fish from rivers or lakes and carry them high into the clouds. When the winds die down, the fish simply fall back to earth with the rain. It sounds logical, except for one strange detail. No one has ever actually seen it happen. No videos, no confirmed footage, no scientific record of fish being lifted by a waterspout over Yoro. And the mystery deepens. Many of the fish that fall from the sky in Yoro aren't even native to local rivers. Some species have never been found anywhere near the region. So where are they coming from? Are they being carried for miles by strange weather patterns? Or could something else be happening beneath the surface? Whether it's a meteorological marvel or a miracle of faith, lluvia de peces remains one of the world's most enduring mysteries. A place where the heavens open not with rain, but with fish. The Australian Toad War. Sometimes the biggest disasters begin with the smallest creatures and the best intentions. In 1935, farmers in northern Australia faced a problem. Tiny beetles called cane beetles were destroying their sugarcane crops, eating the plants before they could be harvested. The solution seemed simple: bring in a predator to eat the beetles. So, scientists imported 102 cane toads from Hawaii, believing the hungry amphibians would feast on the pests and save the sugar industry. It sounded like clever pest control, but what happened next became one of the worst ecological mistakes in history. When the toads arrived, they were released into the wild near Queensland's sugarcane fields. But there was one huge problem. Cane toads can't jump very high, and the beetles they were meant to eat lived at the top of the tall sugarcane stalks. So the toads never reached them. Instead, they turned their appetite toward everything else. They devoured insects, small mammals, birds, reptiles, even pet food left outside people's homes. And without any natural predators in Australia, the cane toads multiplied out of control. From the original 102, their population exploded to more than 200 million. They spread across vast parts of the continent, moving up to 50 kilometers a year, unstoppable and poisonous. That's right, poisonous. Each cane toad's skin contains a powerful toxin that can kill almost any animal that tries to eat it. Native species like crocodiles, snakes, and lizards began dying in massive numbers after mistaking the toads for prey. Even dogs and cats fell victim to the deadly venom. People tried everything to stop them: fencing, hunting, traps, even golf clubs, but nothing worked. The toads just kept coming, hopping further and further each year, leaving destruction behind them. Today, cane toads cover millions of square kilometers of Australia and are considered one of the world's most invasive species. What started as a small attempt to fix nature became a lesson in how quickly human solutions can spiral out of control. The toads were meant to protect the land, but instead, they became its conquerors. Project Pigeon. World War II was a time of desperation and innovation. Every country was looking for new ways to gain an edge. But even among all the crazy military ideas, one project stands out for its sheer absurdity, yet brilliance. Enter Project Pigeon, a top-secret US military program that relied on birds. Yes, pigeons. The mastermind behind it was B.F. Skinner, a famous psychologist and behaviorist. Skinner had already studied how animals could be trained to perform incredibly precise tasks, but this idea took it to a whole new level. The concept was simple but shocking. Attach a screen inside a missile, show pigeons an image of the target, and train them to peck at it. Their pecking would guide the missile, keeping it on course until it hit the intended target. Skinner spent months training the pigeons, rewarding them with food for pecking at the bullseye. He even developed miniature harnesses and perches so the birds could sit comfortably inside a missile during flight. The tests were remarkable. In controlled environments, the pigeons guided the missile with astonishing accuracy. They could distinguish targets from distractions and consistently steer toward the bullseye. But despite the success, the project was never fully implemented. Military officials found the idea too unbelievable. The notion of loading birds into explosives, even trained ones, seemed like something out of a cartoon. So Project Pigeon was quietly shelved, leaving Skinner's feathered missile pilots to history. Still, the project lives on as a legend of creative genius and bizarre military experiments. It's a story that proves one thing: sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and even pigeons can almost become weapons of war. The elephant LSD experiment. In 1962, scientists in Oklahoma embarked on what they called a bold experiment. Their goal? To study the effects of psychedelic drugs on large mammals. The subject was Tusco, a 9-year-old Indian elephant, gentle and towering, weighing nearly 4 tons. The researchers injected Tusco with 297 milligrams of LSD, a dose almost 3,000 times higher than what a human would take. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but within minutes, the elephant's behavior changed dramatically. Tusco began staggering and trumpeting erratically, showing signs of severe distress. He collapsed to the ground, his massive body trembling uncontrollably. Veterinarians tried to save him, but it was too late. The LSD had overwhelmed his system. Tusco died shortly after the injection. The experiment shocked the scientific community and the public. It wasn't just a failed experiment. It was a grim reminder of the danger of human hubris, of testing extreme ideas without fully considering the consequences. Tusco's tragic trip became infamous, often cited as one of the most horrifying and bizarre experiments involving animals. It serves as a stark lesson in ethics, caution, and respect for creatures far different from ourselves. The frozen rats of the Arctic. Deep in the icy expanses of the Soviet Arctic, scientists in the mid-20th century were obsessed with a question: how can living creatures survive extreme cold? Their subjects were ordinary rats, but the experiments they faced were anything but ordinary. The researchers froze the rats alive, exposing them to sub-zero temperatures to see how their bodies reacted. Every shiver, every pulse, every tiny heartbeat was meticulously recorded. The goal was to understand cold adaptation, how cells, tissues, and organs could survive near freezing conditions without dying. Some of the rats didn't survive. Many succumbed to the brutal cold. But the data they gathered was groundbreaking. It offered insights into hibernation, suspended animation, and the limits of life under extreme conditions. Decades later, the lessons learned from those frozen rodents would inspire modern cryogenics research, the field that studies how living tissue can be preserved at very low temperatures. The frozen rats were cruelly treated, yes, but their story also became a stepping stone toward understanding life, survival, and the delicate balance between science and ethics. In the Arctic silence, these tiny animals became the unwilling pioneers of humanity's dream to conquer time, temperature, and death itself. Robo-rabbits. In the swamps and forests of South Florida, a silent war is underway. Burmese pythons, an invasive species, are devouring everything in their path: birds, mammals, even endangered species. But scientists have an unusual new weapon: robots. These aren't ordinary robots. They're robo-rabbits, mechanical creatures designed to mimic real rabbits. They move like the real thing, generate body heat, and even emit lifelike scents to fool the pythons into thinking they've spotted prey. Once a python locks onto the robot, cameras and sensors track its movements, allowing researchers to locate and remove the snake safely. The robo-rabbits are designed for both safety and efficiency. Using live animals as bait was too risky and expensive. A live rabbit could be injured or killed before the scientists had a chance to capture the python. The robots solved that problem, allowing researchers to study and control the pythons without harming other animals. Early tests are promising. The pythons take the bait, revealing their hiding spots in dense swamps that humans or drones cannot navigate. It's a high-tech game of predator and prey, with robotic decoys and deadly snakes locked in a deadly dance. In a world where invasive species threaten ecosystems, these tiny mechanical hunters are giving scientists an edge, a clever, futuristic twist in the ongoing battle to save Florida's native wildlife. The lobster brain experiment. In a lab in Canada, scientists conducted an experiment that sounds straight out of a science fiction movie. They removed the brains of live lobsters. Yes, the lobsters were completely brainless. What happened next shocked everyone. The lobsters continued moving almost normally. They walked, clawed, and even responded to certain stimuli, as if their bodies were acting on autopilot. How was this possible? Unlike humans, lobsters have a distributed nervous system. Their bodies can process basic movements and reflexes without any central brain. In other words, their nerve cords can control them like independent mini-computers, making the lobsters appear zombie-like. The experiment revealed more than just a creepy party trick. It showed how complex behavior can arise without a brain, challenging our ideas about intelligence, consciousness, and control in animals. These brainless lobsters weren't dead. They were living, moving, and eerily functional. A glimpse into a world where the body can act on its own, without the mind pulling the strings. Science had turned a simple crustacean into a real-life zombie, and it left everyone questioning just how much of behavior truly requires a brain. The exploding ants. In the rainforests of Southeast Asia, a tiny creature practices one of the most extreme forms of self-defense in the animal kingdom. Meet Camponotus saundersi, a species of ant with a horrifying secret. When threatened, these ants literally explode. Inside their bodies are toxic chemicals, ready to be released at a moment's notice. If an intruder, whether a rival ant or a predator, gets too close, the ant contracts its muscles until its body ruptures. The explosion sprays deadly toxins in all directions, killing or scaring off the attacker. It's nature's ultimate suicidal defense. Scientists have studied these ants to understand how evolution could produce such a radical strategy. And it's not just theoretical. There are videos capturing these ants in action, their tiny bodies detonating like living grenades. While shocking and gruesome, the behavior serves a crucial purpose: protecting the colony at all costs. In a world full of predators, these ants have taken sacrifice to a literal extreme, turning their very bodies into weapons. The exploding ant is a chilling reminder that nature sometimes writes its rules in the most violent and surprising ways. The python's hidden enemy. In the Florida Everglades, a giant invasive Burmese python is hunting. This massive snake is a top predator, but it carries a silent killer inside: the tongueworm, Rileyetiella orientalis. This parasite is a terrifying hitchhiker that settles in the python's lungs and slowly feeds on its blood. The pythons, which were introduced to Florida years ago, brought this parasite with them, starting a new secret war that is hurting Florida's native snakes. The tongueworm has a bizarre life cycle. The sick python coughs up and passes out the tiny eggs. A smaller creature, like an insect, frog, or lizard, eats the eggs and becomes the next host. The final step happens when another snake eats the infected small animal. The parasite then crawls up to the new snake's lungs, where it grows into an adult, sometimes reaching 3 to 4 inches long. This process is highly effective. Scientists once found over 100 adult worms crammed into one snake's breathing system. While the huge pythons can survive this infection for a long time, the smaller native Florida snakes cannot. Local species like the pygmy rattlesnake and eastern racer don't have the natural defenses against this foreign worm. Because their lungs are smaller, even a few worms cause severe breathing problems, infections, and loss of energy, often leading to death. The parasite is now spreading to many of Florida's native snake species, directly where the pythons have settled, proving that the python invasion brings invisible dangers. The worms aren't the only threat showing the snake's struggles. Snakes are also vulnerable to huge tick infestations. For example, A python in Australia was found covered in over 500 ticks and was desperately trying to drown them. The ticks drank so much blood that the snake became severely anemic, low on blood. Ironically, in a different strange twist of nature, sometimes a snake can survive after being swallowed. If a large predator snake is scared or threatened after a meal, its defense mechanism is to vomit up what it just ate. On rare occasions, this means a smaller snake can pop out, alive, and slide away to freedom. The dead mice airdrop. It started with a strange sight in the skies above Guam. A military helicopter hovers low over the jungle canopy, and then thousands of tiny parachutes begin drifting down through the humid air. But these aren't soldiers. They aren't supplies. They're mice, dead mice, each one carrying a small cardboard parachute and a lethal secret. At first, the people below thought it was some kind of test, maybe a drill. But this was no training exercise. This was an airborne extermination mission, one that sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, because hidden inside every mouse was Tylenol. Yes, the same painkiller sitting in almost every medicine cabinet on Earth. But to one creature, this everyday pill is pure poison. The brown tree snake, an invasive predator that has turned Guam into its personal feeding ground. No one knows exactly how they got here. Most believe they slithered off a cargo ship in the 1950s, unseen, unnoticed, and then they multiplied. Fast. Soon, there were millions. They wiped out nearly every native bird species. They crawled into homes, air bases, and even power stations, short-circuiting transformers, plunging entire neighborhoods into darkness. The US government once estimated the damage at over $4 million a year. Snake traps didn't work. Snake-sniffing dogs couldn't keep up. But then, scientists discovered something bizarre. Just 80 milligrams of acetaminophen, the active ingredient in Tylenol, could kill a snake instantly. And so, the plan was born. If the snakes wouldn't come to the bait would come to them, from the sky. Helicopters flew low over Andersen Air Force Base, releasing thousands of tiny parachutes, each carrying a mouse laced with a deadly microdose. The cardboard and tissue contraptions opened mid-air, fluttering down in eerie silence before catching in the treetops. Up there, in the dense canopy, the snakes waited, unaware that their next meal was their last. Some of the mice were even fitted with tiny radio transmitters, sending data back to wildlife teams on the ground. It sounds absurd, it sounds dark. But for Guam, an island haunted by an invasion it never asked for, the raining mice weren't madness. They were salvation from above.